Welcome to the 2024 Philippine K-Culture Conference. I'm Angela Renzana from the Department of Communication at Hallym University, and I will be your moderator for this morning session. So please rise for the national anthems of Korea and the Philippines. Please be seated. So we have some messages from people who have supported the conference. Okay, beginning with Ambassador Teresa Dizon de Vega, Ambassador of the Embassy of the Philippines to the Republic of Korea. So we'll have a video message from her.
Esteemed Director.
Hi, this is Ambassador Teresa de Vega of the Philippine Embassy in Seoul. On behalf of the entire embassy team, I convey warmest congratulations to the UP Korea Research Center and all the participants and resource persons for the first Philippine K-Culture Conference. This conference, which is part of a larger research project under the theme A Decade of Korea Studies in the Philippines, is made possible by a grant from the Korea Foundation and provides a timely platform to delve more extensively and deeply into the different ways Korean culture is received by global, and in this case, Philippine audiences. The papers to be presented at this conference are manifestations of ways in which cultural and creative content is received by different audiences as well as its impact on representation. I am sure you will have ample opportunities to go beneath the surface of popular content and set the stage for more critical discussions. I wish you all a productive and thought-provoking engagement in the coming days. Kamsahamnida, maraming salamat.
Thank you. And we have Dr. Percival Almoro, Assistant Vice President, Office of the Vice President for Academic Affairs, University of the Philippines.
Esteemed Director Dr. Kyung Min Bae of the UP Korea Research Center, UPKRC, distinguished guests, colleagues, students, friends. Since its launch in 2016, UPKRC has made remarkable strides as one of the leading institutions for Korean studies in the Philippines. It has become an essential hub for understanding research, fostering collaboration, and promoting knowledge exchange between UP, Philippines in general, and the Republic of Korea. One of the most notable accomplishments of the Center has been its role in promoting cross-cultural understanding and research. It is particularly evident through the continued success of HANPIL, Studies on Korea and the Philippines, a refereed journal from the collaboration of prominent scholars in Korean studies from various universities and institutions, both within and outside the Philippines. Policy briefs published by UPKRC upon regular contribution of Filipino and international scholars, and e-proceedings as part of the Center's Korean Studies Knowledge Sharing Project. The UP Korea Research Center stands as a beacon of excellence in academic exchange, fostering collaboration, deepening cultural understanding, and advancing the academic partnership between Philippines and Korea. Through its sustained efforts, UPKRC plays a vital role in shaping the future of research and diplomacy in our region. One of the upcoming initiatives from the Office of the Vice President for Academic Affairs is the Collective Mentorship Program, designed to strengthen research and creative units at the department level. This program features an expanded mentorship structure, inviting collaborations from individuals throughout the whole university and in the public and private sectors, state universities and colleges, private higher education institutions, and industry as affiliate and adjunct members within these groups. I encourage UPKRC to take a proactive stance and engage with the research and creative groups across the entire UP system, particularly with those that share similar interests. I am confident that KRC will actively participate in these collaborations and cooperate alongside the community. With your unique insights in the Philippine-Korean studies and the long-term vision of the research groups, the confidence of the community in combined strengths of UPKRC and the research groups will be significantly enhanced. With that, I warmly welcome you all to the very first Philippine K-Culture Conference, which coincides with the 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Philippines and Korea. I encourage everyone to engage in what promises to be a stimulating exchange of insights as we explore this dynamic world of Philippine and global K-culture. Once again, thank you, Dr. Mia, for the steadfast leadership, and I look forward to a productive and enriching conference with all of you.
Thank you very much. We also have a message from the Embassy of the Republic of Korea in the Philippines. my Paul, Secretary Sang Ho.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Good morning, my name is Sang Ho, Second Secretary of the Korean Embassy. Actually, I haven't prepared for my speech because I didn't expect. Firstly, thank you for inviting me. The ambassador wanted to be here today, but he has another schedule, so he was very regretful not to come here this morning. This occasion is very meaningful, I think. As you know, Korea and Philippines has a long relationship for the last 75 years. Philippines is very friend country to Korea. Korean people is very grateful for our contribution and sacrifice of Philippine people almost 75 years ago in a battlefield on the Korean Peninsula. This year, 75th years for the establishment of diplomatic relations between two Koreas. As you know, the Korean presidents visited the Philippines as a state visit. So we both presidents declared the strategic partnership for the future of the both countries. I think the hero and heroine are you for the next 75 years for both countries. So please, in the wake of this occasion, I hope you have a continued interest and cooperation and keep friendship with Korean people and Korean society and Korean culture. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Secretary Han. So we have finally a message from the organizer of our event, Dr. Kyung-min Bin.
안녕하세요. magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. It's quite early this morning, and I think others are still coming in, but let us start day one of the conference program. This is actually a 2-day conference, which became 3 days until this Saturday. And then today we have a keynote and parallel paper presentations in this Pilar Herrera, and then another room. And a total of 31 papers we received from different students, scholars, and other interested researchers. And I think this is quite an experiment for us as well, because all of you are aware, we know Korean culture has something, but what is that something? And what our Filipino students and Filipino scholars are really into researching about this. So we wanted to approach it as not just a personal interest base, but we wanted to know what all of you are interested and you want to study further. So I think it will be a good learning experience for UPKRC, and hopefully everyone can really enjoy the sessions prepared today and tomorrow. And as you see outside, we also have some partners who have some exhibit items. You can also browse and purchase, and you can know about them because they are Korean-run organizations and also Filipino-run entities. So we can see both ways how Korean culture is really emerging in the Philippines, and also how it is localized in the Philippine landscape. And tomorrow we have two plenary speeches. Dr. Thomas is here today, and we also have Dr. Eric coming tomorrow as well. And then before closing, we also have a round table where you can also share insights how you really observe the Korean culture and its cultural phenomenon in the Philippines. And then lastly, on Saturday, we also have free hip hop performance. Anyone can join. It's free of charge, so you can bring friends and we can really interact. How the music is really an inspiration for both countries. So this is just kind of scholarly place. We can learn from each other, but hopefully, and most of all, we can have fun and you can learn and you can make some new friends through this occasion. So thank you so much. Maraming salamat po. Kamsahamnida.
Thank you, Professor. So indeed, it's in the spirit of collaboration that I think we can produce knowledge and, of course, understand what we call, these global and transnational cultural formations. Okay. So now we proceed to the conference proper. We have, of course, our first keynote, and I am very pleased to introduce our keynote speaker for today. So please allow me to read our speaker's Bionote. Our speaker is definitely a significant scholar, okay, of Korean studies and media. He is Dr. Michael Prieler, and he is professor at media school at Hallym University in South Korea for 16 years, following several years of study and work in Japan. He has also been a visiting professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, at City University of Hong Kong, and at Temple University, Japan campus. His university awarded him the title of Distinguished Professor in 2018 and Best Teacher in 2019. His research focuses on advertising, new media, health communication, and diversity in the media, particularly representations of gender, race, ethnicity, and age, often from a comparative perspective. He has published in a variety of international top journals, including Mass Communication Society, Journalism and Mass Communication Quarterly, International Communication Gazette, Health Communication, Telematics and Informatics, Telecommunications Policy, Sex Roles, the Social Science Journal, and the International Journal of Cultural Studies, among others. So his latest book was on Advertising in Aging Society, Understanding Representations, Practitioners, and Consumers in Japan. So to talk about From Foreigners to Artificial Intelligence, Diverse Research on Korean Media and Culture, I am pleased to present Professor Michael Prieler.
Okay, thank you so much for the nice introduction. Magandang umaga. Annyeonghaseyo. Good morning, everybody. So let me start. Okay, I will speak about From Foreigners to AI, Diverse Research on Korean Media and Culture. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizer, the Korea Research Center at UP, who invited me. Particularly Professor Bay, who contacted me around half a year ago, and also all the other organizers who made this event today possible, basically. When Professor Bay invited me half a year ago, I have to say when I received the email, I was not so sure what to do. Because I regard myself as a media scholar, not necessarily as a Korean studies scholar. So it took me some thought whether I can contribute something or not. But after some consideration, I realized actually I had more than 20 publications that are on Korea, and some of them only on Korea, others are more comparative in nature. So finally I realized maybe I can give a bit of an outsider perspective to a certain extent, which might also contribute something to this conference. And here actually I looked at it, at my own publications. That's the word cloud of the titles of my publications. And there is very small in the center here. Here you can see Korean. It's not very big, but there is some Korea. There's also South, which also is about Korea, basically. You can see there are bigger ones like advertising, agenda. Even Japan is actually much bigger than Korea. But anyway, there is also something about Korea. That's why, as I said, I looked and really through my publication that there were more than 20, so I thought, anyway, there's something I can contribute. In the end, I had actually the opposite problem. I did not know anymore what to choose because time is very limited. But anyway, before I want to start the real presentation, I was kind of thinking, I cannot just start now and speak about K-drama, K-pop, whatever else. That felt a bit inappropriate to me to a certain extent. Actually, I arrived on Tuesday night, or actually Wednesday morning, maybe it was 1 in the morning. I arrived in the airport in Manila, and I opened my phone, and there was something quite striking when I opened my phone. And I want to mention it because I think it's also related to Korean culture somehow. And that's why I briefly want to mention maybe something the typical Korean culture scholars are not so aware of. And so when I opened my phone, I saw this kind of things, messages from all around the world kind of asking me if I'm fine and whatever. And that's not the main point I want to raise here. Everybody knows these events, you saw it in the news. But there's something else about Korean culture which I want to mention. And a short story about that. I know I should not take too much time on that. I walk every day in the morning to my office, and at the evening I walk home. And on the way to my office, I pass by the government building of Gangwon-do, which is the province where I am. And in front of this government building of Gangwon-do, nearly every day, there's something like that. Sometimes hundreds of people, actually most of the time it's only 1 or 2 people. But people are really protesting. They're demonstrating. They are really, I would say, like doing that. And I think that's really, for me, being in Korea for 16 years, that's really a very big part of Korean culture nowadays. And it really became a part of Korean culture. And it has very much to do with the events 2 days ago. People really embrace it, that now there's democracy. And they can raise their voice, and they can raise their opinions, and they're allowed to stand every day, even if they're alone, stand every day in front of this government building and demonstrate whatever, raising their voices. So in that sense, I think that's something very interesting about Korean culture, and I wrote the new K-wave because I think there are many other countries who also can learn something from it. So basically, I think when I look the news around the world, in so many countries there are some kind of populists being elected and who often have some kind of authoritarian tendencies. So often it's not so far away from something like that also. And then I think it needs some people to go up and to stand for it and to stand for democracy and basically fight for it. So again, in that sense, I think also K-wave, and to give a short also parallel to the Philippines, I think if you look at the history, Philippines also till the end of the 1980s, similar like Korea, was not a democracy, actually, very similar timing. So in that sense, I think also in the Philippines, there has to be some fight for democracy and also thinking about whom to vote next time to make the right choices, not that it gets in a similar direction. Okay, that was the side note about Korean culture, but again, I think it's actually a very important part of Korean culture. When you live there, you really realize, I've lived in many countries and visited so many countries, but I've never been to any country where there's so many demonstrations like in Korea, actually, which I think is something positive. It's really an expression of democracy. Okay, finally, let's go to the prepared presentation. I will speak about different topics, and I will go through this quite quickly. I have actually 100 slides, I can do that. And again, I had like more than 20 studies, so I had to kind of select. And in the end of the day, I decided to focus on something which I did in many countries. And the first thing I will focus on is on advertising. I did a lot of studies on advertising, but I will refer to culture, so I will not speak about selling products or something like that. Then I will present very quickly 2 master theses out of many master theses we had over the years, which I thought are kind of interesting, and that's why I highlighted short. In the end, I will short speak about virtual influencers and AI-generated models. That's a research I'm currently doing, and I think Korea is also very much in the forefront when it comes to these kind of topics. Korea is really embracing AI a lot. And in the very end, I will speak very short. Originally, I planned to do it much longer, but I realized I had already so many slides, so I did it quite short. I speak a bit about broadening the future of K-culture research, maybe from my outsider perspective. And maybe I might also be wrong because I'm not a Korean studies scholar, so I don't know everything. But nevertheless, I followed this for many years from the sidelines, so I think I'm quite familiar with the literature nevertheless. Okay, I already took 7 minutes, but now I will become faster. So let's start with the beginnings. How did it all start? I checked through my hundreds of presentations, and I was actually kind of interesting to see that the first time in a presentation I mentioned Korea was in 2004, 20 years ago, which makes me feeling very old now. And that was in a presentation of Hallym University in Japan, where I spoke about foreign elements in Japanese commercials. And at that time, in 2004, there was actually something, Korea really became popular in Japan for the first time. And there were particularly 2 people at that time. One was Boa, a singer at that time, and the other one was Bae Yong-chun. You can see I was not a Korean scholar. I wrote it actually totally wrong at that time. But at least, again, I was actually going to Japan at that time. And he was famous for this Winter Sonata drama, and that was a big hit in Japan. That really changed the perception of many people in Japan about Korea. It was kind of the first starting point. And I myself watched this drama, actually, just a side note. It was mostly aired around midnight, and I was mostly at that time typing my doctoral thesis. And it was just running in the background somehow, so I was kind of watching that most of the time. And here, just one slide out of this presentation, what I wrote here in 2004 is, Yon Sama, that's how it was called in Japan, became the heartbreak of a Japanese woman. He came to assume the role the Caucasian man had before. It's also interesting to note there were actually many dating agencies that started specializing in Korean men. Sounds kind of awkward maybe, but again, there was kind of, especially Japanese middle-aged women became all of a sudden very interested in Korea and also in Korean men. And so there was a clearly displayed Japanese women in that ad here. I don't show it. This woman is kind of, the product is actually about movie mail. There's a new product at that time, and she imagined that this Yonsama is calling her basically, and then this Yonsama is even saying "koibi" to death, which means like "I'm your lover" basically, and she's like fainting then in the last sequence. But finally, she's waking up and realizing that's a dream actually she had, so it's not real. But again, it was this imagination of Korea, I would say, from a country more or less ignored in the past. To say it even in a positive way, not to say, I would say Japanese more looked down actually at Korea in the past. At that time it became kind of a trendsetter actually, at least for some people. So that was really the starting point. So big jump forward, let's speak a bit about advertising and the research I did. And I give a short background, and after that I will speak about gender, race, ethnicity, and also about older people in ads. So let's think about research in advertising and why I'm actually doing that. This is data from an online source basically that shows within advertising scholars. I was surprised myself. I'm actually 0.66% in the world, so the top 1% of advertising scholars. So I thought that's something I can at least contribute something to this advertising, and it's also related to Korea. So how is advertising related to society and culture, which is the kind of main topic in here? So some scholars argue advertisements need to reflect the social norms practiced in a given culture. So basically you can only, it can be only based on culture, otherwise people will not understand basically the ads. And some people also argue advertisements take on the status of fascinating cultural documents. In that sense, you can also study ads to learn more about the culture. So the idea is culture and society might influence advertising. Some even argue that it might reflect advertising. But the question is it really reflecting? Is it a one-to-one reflection? And there's a famous scholar, Richard Polly, who argues it's actually a distorted mirror, some kind of damaged mirror, which shows some parts bigger and other parts smaller. I give one example. For example, older women are very rarely seen in advertising. They are way more existing in reality. So again, in that sense, advertising is focusing on some parts more, in that case younger women, and other parts less, for example older women. So advertising has an effect on culture, society. Advertising plays an important role in society today. Advertising teaches us about social roles and values. As I already said, some scholars argue there's a distorted mirror. And this distorted representation of a group of people are major social issues, since they tell us something about the worth of those groups of people. George Gerben argues, what does that mean? If a group is represented, it means they are basically have a value in society. If they are rarely shown, for example, older women, it kind of shows society is maybe not valuing them as much as they actually should. And that's something to keep in mind in the following slides there. And there's also some other way around, basically, that advertising is also influencing culture and society, so there's some kind of effect of ads and other media certainly on back on culture and society. And there are different series. I don't go into detail. If you're a communication scholar, you probably heard about this series. I just mentioned two: social cognitive theory, cultivation theory. Social cognitive theory basically says we learn something from the media just by observing something. And cultivation theory says something similar, but adds one point that basically says the more we consume media, the more our worldview becomes like in the media, and not necessarily like it's in reality, but we get kind of a mediated worldview basically. And there have been many studies who prove this series, which has an effect basically of media, also advertising, on the perceptions we all have on, like these are the topics I speak today, on gender relationships, on race, ethnicity, on older people. And what is also interesting, not only the perception we have, but also the group themselves. So also, for example, how older people feel about themselves, they learn that also from the media. And it has sometimes very surprising effects that people even get some hearing impairment, even so they have actually nothing. It's really psychologically to a certain extent. Okay, that's the short background about this advertising. And the last slide about this introduction about advertising, maybe something you might think about when you see the next time a TV ad or other ad, how to actually deconstruct these representations. There's a very simple kind of rule about that. There's a test: if power relations are normalized within a society, try to tell the story with reverse roles and think about it if it's imaginable or not. So for example, imagine the man prepares the breakfast in the ad and the woman sits at the table and reads the newspaper. So you switch the roles. Most you see it the other way around. Or, can a woman be exchanged with a man? It's just what I said. Can a foreigner be exchanged with a Filipino person in the ad? Can a younger person be exchanged with an older person there? And so on. You can always think about, is it possible or not? And are these changes imaginable? Does the meaning of the ad change? That tells us a lot actually about kind of social conventions and expectations within society. So here you see one ad, that's the original ad, very weird sexualized ad of a woman eating a burger. and here somebody is remaking it of a man eating a burger. I think both are weird actually, but these type of ads we already kind of saw sometimes maybe. This ad, I think we never saw anything like that. So again, we just tells us what is normalized in society and what is not normalized. So finally, let's go into the different parts. First, I will start quickly about race ethnicity. I don't show you about data collection or whatever, I don't have the time for that. If you're interested, I can send you the papers. So first, I just present some of the results, please. So that's one study I did. One of the first studies actually when I came to Korea on race ethnicity in Korean TV ads. We basically sampled all the major TV stations over several weeks and did a systematic quantitative content analysis. And that's what we found. Within all the ads, around 20% actually featured foreigners. You might say it's not so much. But on the other hand, at that time, actually, there were only around 2% of the population were foreigners at that time in Korea. And most of them, you would not even say racial others, because most of them were actually Chinese. So in that sense, it's still a highly overrepresentation compared to demographic reality at that time. In terms of the groups, we found is clear dominance of white people, 80%. Probably nobody is really surprised about that. But still, it also tells us something about society, it tells us something about the world. Because it could also be that it's 80% black people. I mean, there's no given about it. It's just that we live in this kind of world that is dominated by Western countries and so on for many decades, and by Hollywood movies and whatever other popular culture that makes us, again, this kind of thought normalized, and we take it for granted. But again, it could also be that why not 80% black people? Why not? But it's not how it is. Also very strong dominance of men, 60%. So it basically means white men. Most of the ads were. Very few women actually were shown alone, and some were shown together. Mostly young, that was similar to general ads also within Koreans, but also way stronger with 50% of ads actually were young people, so that's very strong again. And also some kind of age discrimination, something we will speak later on more about. That's also interesting, celebrity versus non-celebrity. Only 13% of ads were celebrity. That's quite surprising because within all the ads, including Koreans, actually 60% of the ads had celebrities. But within foreigners, it was a very small number. Again, what does this maybe tell us is these white men, they are functioning as a celebrity even if nobody knows them, kind of. So they have some kind of value. You don't have to pay an expensive celebrity. Basically, you just pick one foreigner from the street and put him in the ad, and it's kind of a similar maybe effect as if you take a celebrity. And that's something we also saw when we looked at the roles. Most of these foreigners were shown in major roles. Means they were the main character. They were not somewhere in the background or some supportive character, basically. They were really the main roles. They were also rarely interacting with other people. They were mostly alone, actually, not much interacting. And that's, in two senses, important. On the one hand, again, it shows their importance. They are alone, and that's enough. But on the other hand, it also tells us they're never interacting with Koreans. It doesn't really promote the multicultural society, I would say, if you always show them separate and alone, basically. So in that sense, again, it's some kind of a message told. Again, all these advertising producers are not thinking about it. I'm aware of that. But again, it's nevertheless some kind of messages that are implied within the culture. This is just some of these photos. I don't have time to show any real ads, so I just some photos. Often very stereotypical, especially when it came to black people. There were only musicians and sports. There was nothing else when it came to black people. But again, that's not only Korea. That's very similar in other countries. Very reduced representations. Okay, let's kind of wrap up this foreigner part. Bit concluding on that. I think in general, I mean, going away a bit from ads, that's a very important topic. Race, ethnicity, foreigner in Korea nowadays. There are several issues related to it. Aging population, low birth rates. Has nothing to do with foreigners itself, but it leads to foreigners, kind of. There's a big discussion. Korea might need more foreigners. because Koreans are dying out, basically, to say it in a very simple way. And also, there's a rise in foreign workers. I can say this myself, in the Korean countryside where I'm living, there were nearly no foreigners when I came there. Even now, not many, but now really many migrant workers. In all of these new apartment buildings, mostly migrant workers. There are nearly no Koreans working anymore. So in that sense, it totally changed within the last decade or something like that. Increase in so-called multicultural families. Kind of also side note on that. What means multicultural families? It changed a bit over the past few years, I would say, but overall it's still the old definition. Multicultural family means one parent is Korean and the other parent is a foreigner. In my case, we are both foreigners, we are not multicultural. That's kind of interesting, and it also leads to all kind of effects. There are tons of support programs for these multicultural families, but only if there's one Korean. So again, that's something that has to be, it's slowly changing, but it's something that certainly has to change. And as I said, there are policy changes. I'm only there for 16 years, I observed that. And when you read the newspaper, like Korean Times or something like this, I guess some of you are following this, you feel like, oh, it's becoming really open to foreigners. And I think there are really changes. It's true. Positive changes, even under the current administration. Obviously, they realize they need some foreigners. But on the other hand, I have to say, it's not like the newspapers say. I'm in charge of international students nearly since I'm there. And I have to say, the good side is, yes, it became easier to stay in Korea. Like nowadays, you can search a job for 1 year or something, you get still a visa. In the past, they were just kicked out, they did not care, basically. Nowadays, they realize this is also a resource and they should keep them there, ideally. They are already there for several years, so it's good to keep them. But nowadays, they can stay for, I think, 1 year and can extend another year. They can basically search a job. So that's the good side. The bad side is the visa requirements became crazy. It was so much easier 10 years ago to bring an international student to Korea than nowadays. Nowadays, they need like 1,000 requirements and a lot of money and whatever other things. So it really, this became more difficult. So again, I think overall it's going in the right direction, but there's still much to do. Okay, so much about this race ethnicity. And again, this all plays together with culture, all these developments. How is this shown in media and in other forms of culture? How is this actually represented and how does this actually all play together? And that's something you can also think about when you think about possible research topics maybe. So let's go to the next part, which is one of my favorite parts actually, gender. And I think gender is a very important topic for the Korean context. If you look all these gender rankings, gender gap index by the World Economic Forum and others, there's a very long list and you keep searching for Korea and there are like 150 countries and somewhere 143, finally Korea is coming. Somewhere in the neighbors of Saudi Arabia and something like that. So it's the total opposite to Philippines. Philippines is mostly doing very well actually in this kind of gender rank indexes. Korea is not doing well and we will see later on why. But that's why I think studying gender in Korea is still a very important topic. And there are also other issues, not only work issues and so on. Again, when we look at gender, I was kind of a bit honored and again surprised to see there was a recent actually article in the Journal of Advertising, which is the #1 journal in that area, and they made a 50 years bibliometric analysis and ranked the scholars in gender of advertising, and I was the #3 in that time. So I was surprised, but also honored naturally to see that. And some of these studies were also in Korea. And actually, honestly, it's not even all the studies. Seemingly, they only counted the first author studies, so in that sense. So let's look at gender. I did many studies. I just picked one study that compares now 3 different places. I thought it's maybe a bit more interesting than just picking Korea. That was comparing Japan, South Korea, and Hong Kong. We did that maybe like 8 years ago, something like that. And what you can see here, predominance of men versus women. South Korea was the only country actually where there were more men in the ads than women. And it's a bit hard to really say why. I would say the reason why it was actually in the other countries, there were probably so many women because there were a lot of ads with products targeting women. That was probably the number one reason. And I would also still say men, but I think Japan is not different in any way. Men are certainly very powerful in Korea, there's no question about that. That certainly also plays a role in that context. This is another study we did with certain countries actually. You can really not see anything now, but it's still interesting to see with all these 13 countries, there were actually only 2 countries that had a statistically significant gender difference, and there were more male than female, and this was South Korea and Brazil. There were no other countries. I mean, there's also China and whatever, but this is not statistically significant difference. So this is again very few countries only are like that. We also looked at age. That's something I already mentioned previously. Age. What we found, similar to the other 2 places, women were mostly young, 73%. Really nobody old, 4%. In the case of men, it was more evenly distributed, actually more middle-aged men than young men. And again, not so different to the other 2 countries, might be related to the same kind of Confucianist legacy or whatever the reasons are. But again, it shows the so-called double standard of aging, which was in the Western countries already criticized in the 1970s by a scholar called Susan Sontag. And she kind of argued, in the case of men, it's kind of permissive to become older, or it might even add value. If a man gets older, he gets more powerful, kind of. In the case of women, the main value, unfortunately, traditionally in many cultures, is beauty. And the beauty is kind of going down, what many societies are saying. And again, this is very strongly reflected, unfortunately, the stereotype in this kind of data here. What we also found is there were a lot of, again, only men, experts. They were always older men, and we never ever saw an older woman expert. Never. In all of these thousands of ads in Hong Kong, Japan, and South Korea. I guess there are sometimes some, but at least in our sample we had none at that time. So again, expert means older man, and not so much older woman. Degree of dress, so we categorized how much clothes they actually had. You see what kind of things researchers are doing the whole day. And so what we found basically is in the case of men, they were pretty much 98% always fully dressed. In the case of women, it was only 48%. Very big gap again, which again shows this sexualization of women. And again, most of us are, as scholars, we are used to it. We see it every day. We don't question it even anymore. But seeing the data, you're still like, hey, what's going on? Kind of, why is it like that? It's like that because we're all used to it, I would say. And the advertisers are reproducing that. And there were actually more, 49% that were suggestively dressed, which means a very short skirt or showing some body parts, basically. So again, sexualization of women is certainly an issue in many countries. Not only here, I show you another example here, Philippines, very similar data. 88% of men fully dressed, only 44% of women fully dressed. So nothing to blame Korea. It's really nearly a global tendency, I would say, unfortunately. Sexualization of women, something we really have to deal more with and not just take it for granted. Also the camera angle, it's not only the numbers. We looked also a bit in a qualitative way. I don't show the video, but basically how the frames went. That's how the camera went. So they were really kind of checking out the woman, you would say. And another one, and there are so many ads like that. I don't know, these cameramen are all they are all I don't know, old nasty men, or I don't know what it is. But it's really stunning. Who's producing this? In the 20th century or 21st century, I don't know, I'm really stunned sometimes what is going on in the world. Also, certainly there are some product categories where it's particularly not much clothes and very slim people also. We also found, I don't show the data now, but we found certainly women are way slimmer than men. Again, not surprising. And there are certainly also slimming products That's from China, and that's one is from Korea. Slimming products that also show basically women in slightly dressed and also often extremely thin waist, like this one. Looks like nearly breaking apart in the middle actually. You can nearly not see any waistline anymore here. We also looked at the setting. That's basically the place where the actors where they are. And I also have in some other countries. I added that from other studies. One study I did with Dave Centeno, who is here today, in the Philippines also. And what we looked here into is, again, very stereotypical. Women, 39% were mostly shown in home, doing typical home activities like cooking, and men were mostly shown at work. In the case of Korea, there was not one single ad where a woman was in work. That's again 0%. That's not even one. So that's really very stunning at that time. But again, Philippines, not too different. The percentages are different, but the gap is very similar. We had again way more women at home, way more men at work. But at least there were some women at work also in the case of the Philippines. Voiceover is this kind of background voice you sometimes see in TV ads. And some scholars are arguing this is the voice of authority, some scholars are arguing. So this is kind of explaining the product, for example. So this must be some authority voice, and traditionally it's said this is the male voice. Not my voice, but with a very deep voice. Some Hollywood actor moving voices. And in the case of Korea, actually it was not statistically significant. There were more men than women, but not so big gap. In the case of Hong Kong and Japan, it was actually a bigger difference, which is more typical also in other countries. So I think I'm doing well. I have 30 minutes already. I think I can do that, and I have 43 slides. So that's the voiceover. Product category we also looked was also quite stereotypical. Cosmetic toiletries, that's not surprisingly for most of us, certainly more women than men. What else? Food, which is often related with cooking, also more women than men. And on the other hand, mobile phones, which is maybe more technical, were more men actually. So again, the beauty products, again, very stereotypical. Women are, unfortunately, I would say most society still, it's kind of a requirement and expectation that women care for their beauty. That's why so many beauty products are for women. Even so, I have to say Korea is quite different in that sense, because basically they are really also men are using some beauty products. Okay, then if we look about gender outlook, pop culture, there's basically some things in general to think about. Gender equality, inequality is one of the big issues. That means there's a wage gap, workplace discrimination, certainly. There's also political polarization of gender issues. We saw this particularly under the current administration, where basically wanted to abolish the gender ministry. There's emergence of the so-called 4B movement, that women are kind of fighting back to a certain extent, and also some tendencies related to media, digital sexual crimes and so on, like deepfake video, secret filming, all these kind of issues. And again, some of these topics might be maybe related also maybe to some of your research interests. Okay, let's go quick to the older people in TV ads. That's also an important topic. Aging societies are true in most developed countries around the world. Japan is kind of leading, but South Korea is going up like a rocket. That's the green line. It's actually the fastest aging society in the world. And additionally, it's also the country with the lowest birth rate in the world. So it's kind of a dangerous combination of the two. So which leads to all kind of issues in the future, certainly. Here we looked, compared demographic reality and at that time and TV ads. This was actually 50 years and older at that time. That's already several years ago. And Korea was actually quite similar compared to other countries. We also looked at men and women, similar what we already spoke before about. In the case of older people, there might be some men, but there are pretty much no women. In some ads they were living together, but women alone were really never shown. Then roles of older people, they were mostly shown in major roles, which is positive. That means they have some value maybe. We also showed them mostly with other age group. So that was the typical depiction. They were kind of the grandparents or something like that. That was the typical depiction in this kind of ads. The setting was actually quite positive in that sense. They were mostly outdoors, and to look more in a qualitative way, it meant they were active. They were like hiking or something like that, or going to restaurants or something like that. And the product categories, they were mostly stereotypical. Like one of the most prominent one was pharmaceuticals, basically for some ailments, and the other one was financial insurance, which was also often related to some retirement health issues actually. If you think about older people outlook, pop culture, there are certainly many things, rapid aging population as I said, elderly poverty, that's a big issue. Within all the developed countries, Korea is actually the one with the biggest problem of poor older people. There are also cultural shifts in caregiving. Traditionally, it was done by the family. Nowadays, many families don't want to do that anymore. Again, media representation, something you might think about. Workforce participation. More and more older people want to do it, but there's also the discussion they have to do it actually. Loneliness, social isolation, again, because of this generational households are collapsing. Many are living alone and maybe get lonely. There's certainly some policy changes, and this has all kind of future implications on retirements, pensions, many things, again, all kind of issues. And you can think about some of these topics, again, might be maybe related to some research issues in media. How is this all represented in the media and so on? Okay, I know I have now my 40 minutes, but Professor Bay granted me 50 yesterday, so I still have 10, and I can do that in the 50 minutes. I will be quite quick on these ones. I just want to show very quickly. So one thesis I want to mention briefly, it's from 2018, already some years ago. Popularity of Korean wave in Northeast India. In the meanwhile, there's already some studies on that. At that time, it was nearly none. At that time, I found this quite interesting. And that was about an area which was called Manipur in the northeast India. And what has to be said here is people that don't look like you expect an Indian to look. They more look like East Asian or something like that. So they look more, as I said, East Asian, not like what you expect an Indian look. They are on the borders basically to these neighboring countries. That's maybe also part of the explanation why it's so popular there, not only. But this was a large-scale survey of more than 200 young people actually, and at that time I found most it was very popular among these younger people actually. They were only not popular at all, only 1% said, a very small number. First K-wave content you encountered was actually K-drama and movies and K-pop. Not surprisingly, I think similar in other countries. How often they watch K-movies or K-dramas? Majority 1 to 2 times a week, 3 to 4 times a week. Also some had. Is it good? The North Indian like K-culture, and the majority again said basically yes. And again, maybe it's connected with the fact in the interviews. They also did some interviews. They showed they feel really related. They thought it's similar to their culture actually, not only the looks. And then one thing from K-wave you use in daily life, the number one was all of them actually, and then style and also language. They use things like Anyong and Kamsamnida and whatever, which was kind of funny to hear, but which movie you prefer? Hollywood, Bollywood, Hollywood, Tollywood is actually Bengali movies. And the number one was Hollywood, but immediately after was actually Hollywood movies at that time. And what is interesting, there was also a big gender gap, which is I think true in much K-wave countries. Women in general were way more enthusiastic and knew more about Korean culture and were also buying fashion products and so on, while men, they were also interested but not so interested. So we also did some more complicated statistic. I don't show this now, but basically these were the results of this. Okay, so second study, very brief, is actually one of your colleagues, originally from UP, and who then went to the master program in the Philippines, in Korea. And actually recently, just 1 week ago, we published the article on that short version of the thesis kind of. So again, I don't have to tell you, Korean is very popular in the Philippines. I think I can skip that. In many ways, very popular, the K-wave for many years. And Beauty products are also something that are certainly popular, not only in Philippines, also in other countries, like there were studies in Uzbekistan, China, and so on, and that's all traveling with the dramas and so on. People see that. Sometimes also there's product placement. They see the products and then they get interested in these kind of products. And as you all know, social media influencers are everywhere nowadays. And basically what she did in these studies is looking at social media influencers in the Philippines who are kind of promoting these Korean beauty products. And very quick, most of the influencers were interestingly actually so-called nano-influencers, which have less than 10,000 followers. That's a very small number, but all of you can already make money like that. If you have less than 10,000 followers. I was actually surprised by that. The number 2 was 10 to 100,000. I think that's really hard to reach. But less than 10,000 is not so difficult. They were mostly in beauty, fashion, and lifestyle. Mostly female, nearly all of them actually. I think the other things we don't really need now. What is also interesting is many of the posts had a Korean reference. Means like the flag or something like that. And what was interesting is if there was a Korean reference, we compared thousands of posts, this led to higher engagement. Engagement means people are liking it or commenting it or something like that. So the reference to Korean wave basically played off. Anyway, I have no time, so I skip this now. Very quickly, virtual influencers, again I go this through fast. Virtual influencers are the same like influencers, but they are mostly AI created. They're not real people actually. That's a general trend. Better control of influencers' behaviors. They have no scandal, cost-saving, zeitgeist motives are some of the reasons. These are some of the most popular ones. Some have several millions of followers actually, and some are also Korean. These are the most popular Korean ones. Rosie is the number 1. There are also other ones. I skipped this one. So again, she's the number 1 virtual influencer in Korea, and she looks not so real, but there are some other ones that look actually very real, like this one. You could think she's one of my students. I mean, she looks really real. She doesn't look, but she's AI generated. She's not real. And there's a second part of AI generated models, I call them. That's kind of flooding the internet nowadays. Everybody can produce AI content nowadays in a very easy way. And that's why nowadays it's flooding Instagram. And mostly they are not promoting products, mostly they promote themselves. Means there's a link to a website where you can watch them naked or something like that. And they are AI generated, but seemingly some people are interested in that nevertheless. And people try to earn money in that way. And let me show very quick the data, what we did on that. We found nearly only women in that kind of Instagram. We looked at thousands of Instagram posts, nearly only women, nearly only white, but the important part is 70% are also East Asian and 20 Koreans. So that's also would be interesting case study to look into Korean AI influencers actually. Age, mostly young, nearly only young actually. And I blurred it, I don't want to contribute to the sexualization of women. But basically they were all in bikinis, underwear, or something like that, nearly nothing else. Okay. Body type, again, very stereotypical, very sexualized images. Degree of dress, way worse than in the TV ads before, they had really no dress. As I said, mostly underwear, bikini, nothing else. Some you could even see through actually, which I'm surprised that Instagram is allowing that. And many had external links. And most of the external links, more than 70% explicit content. So again, kind of shocking. So in terms of AI, sexualization of AI-generated Korean women, that would be an interesting topic, I think. Also the sexualization, actually, a very big issue. AI is highly embraced in South Korea. I think it's everywhere in the world, but Korea is crazy about it. So way stronger, so think about it. AI-created content is more trending in South Korea compared to other countries. Also AI-created pop groups, these are just 2 examples, really popular. They tried to export it, did not work very well actually. But in Korea it works well. AI in the Korean entertainment industry in general. Okay, and last but not least, the last 5 minutes, or 3 minutes. Broadening future of K-culture research. So that's actually the vertical out of all presentations of this conference. And culture, Korea, Filipino, not surprising. And this is the topics by categories of K-Wave. TV drama, music, K-pop. Again, not surprising, that's what mostly research is about, but I would say, why not doing also something else? Webtoons only one, but Webtoons is very big actually. Why not also thinking about some other things and not always just K-drama and K-pop? There are also other topics. Here also fandom, not surprisingly, is one of the number one, again related to K-pop. I just read it through now, I don't have time to explain it much. Some things that came to my mind which might be also of interest. Games. Korea is such a big player in games. Why not more studies on Korean games and also like how Filipinos use it or something like that. You can also compare maybe with Japanese games. Webtoons. Social media and news culture, Instagram, YouTube, and so on. As I said, AI, virtual influencer, very big in Korea. Unimaginable big actually compared to other countries. Traditional Korean culture, modern society, Hamburg, traditional medicine and so on, also something that is becoming more and more popular. Hallyu beyond entertainment, food, beauty products, fashion, spread of Korean language. I saw there are some presentations, but again, these are topics that could be more. Sports and national identity, Olympics, Taekwondo, whatever. There are some sports that really lead to national pride, and also how it's communicated in ads and TV coverage and so on. Press and social issues, just what I said in this presentation, gender equality, immigration, aging society, and so on, and culture, media, important topic. Korea and the Philippines, that brings us back to the beginning of the presentation. Something like demonstration, fight of democracy, how is it different, how is it similar, for example. And using other methods, most of the studies are qualitative, that's fine, nothing against qualitative. But maybe sometimes it would also be interesting to mix some methods you can maybe do together with some colleague who knows how to do it. Also quantitative studies. There are some areas that might be good for quantitative studies, like data analytics for trends in social media engagement with K-content, large-scale surveys about audience preferences, economic contributions of Hallyu country of origin and so on. This is a mixed method. Comparative research is very important. Some years ago we looked into comparative research of Korean studies. Most of them were comparing Korea and US. Not surprising because so many Koreans are studying in the US that that's becoming their doctoral thesis and then they publish it. But again, first of all, two countries comparing is relatively meaningless, I have to say, from a theoretical point of view to test theories. And why not other studies? Why not other countries? K-drama adaptation in different countries, for example, or K-drama versus other drama, like Turkish drama is big, maybe in this part of the world not, but in other parts of the world. So how is it different and how is it similar, for example? And a very long, never-ending list. Now that's my last slide. You can breathe now deeply. In my one, it's 48 minutes. And K-pop Filipino fandom, we do this a lot, but maybe there's also a new perspective, a bit different than what most people do. Korean drama in Philippines, I know there's also a lot, but maybe a different perspective. Hallyu consumer behavior, again, that's a big topic actually. We're a bit interested in marketing consumer. It has such a big effect. People think totally different about Korea when they consume K-content. And that has an effect on more buying Samsung phones, fridges, whatever else. Brings a lot of money to Korea. Comparing educational technology used in Korea and the Philippines, there's a lot of use actually in Korea these days. Effects of academic exchange program between the two countries. People who stayed in the Philippines or people who stayed in Korea, how do they change their life? How does it change their attitudes? I stayed as a student in Japan for many years. Sure, I think differently about Japan than somebody else. So this certainly has effect on people. Filipino-Korean families in Korea or Philippines, or in comparative. Migrant workers, Koreans in Philippines, Filipinos in Korea, again, all kind of options. Korean cuisine in Philippines, also fusion cuisine. Again, there are some people already doing things, but I think not a lot. Social media and Hallyu. Social media is also something that can be studied way more. What do Filipinos think about AI, virtual influencers? As I said, Korea is very popular. The role of things like K-pop cafes and so on, I know some people are already doing, I think there could be more. Filipino tourists and K-wave, or the other way around, Korean tourists' impact on Filipino tourism industry. So these are all kind of more applied research, I would say. Comparative parenting approach is totally different, but maybe it would also be interesting to look something into and also culture related. Effects of Korean beauty standards on Filipinos, that's something I hear a lot actually from Filipinos. That the beauty standard maybe in the past was more looking towards the West. now often also we're looking towards Korean, for example. Korean and Filipino heritage preservation. Again, maybe you can learn something from each other, actually, how to deal with these things. Also, LGBTQ plus representation in both countries. I think it's very different, but still some interesting topics. And there's a very long etc. list. And then, thank you so much for your attention. I'm happy to get into the questions. Okay, I don't know if there's still time for questions now. Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prieler. So please have a seat on the stage. So we will now proceed to the question and answer part, or the open forum of our first plenary session. So allow me to start the conversation. So first of all, it was a really comprehensive discussion, especially the role of advertising in, not just representing, but it could be argued in reconstituting our perceptions of gender roles, race, ethnicity, and of course, generational differences in Korea. And in fact, the data clearly sort of demonstrate how conservative, perhaps, is the way in which, notions of age, gender, and race are actually presented in the media. And of course, how, this is actually understood in everyday life, okay? Not just in Korea, but outside Korea. And now this is an opportunity where we're able to actually reflect. And one great thing that you also do is to compare advertising in Korea and the Philippines. And perhaps that's quite instructive because it's very conservative. We can see the parallels between Philippines and Korea, and perhaps that, I argue, could be a source of appeal why Filipinos love Korean media, because the tinge of conservatism is there. Okay. But of course, tomorrow we will all turn that around when the space of conservatism actually sort of has a counterpoint, which is the space of queerness. Okay, then that's why the conference is fabulously designed. So, any reactions from the audience? So you can approach the mic. There's one on the left hand and the right hand.
Let me maybe say one word about what you just commented. I think very interesting what you said about conservatism. I think one thing we should not forget when we speak about TV ads or media in general is it's mostly targeting a mass audience.
Correct.
And in that sense, it may be nearly by definition, it's to a certain extent conservative. Because it should not shock some people basically, so it has to be kind of safe. And in that way, I think that's maybe one reason why the results, like in Korea and Philippines, are quite similar. And I would argue even other countries that you might think are not conservative, even there the results are not too different actually. As I said, we did some certain country studies, and I think advertising is everywhere a bit conservative and is always a bit back to social developments to a certain extent. There's certainly some exceptional ads, but there's a bit the tendency of that, unfortunately.
But that's really the great, sort of lesson here, especially when you talk about advertising media. It really reinforces more or less the norms. Yeah, and that's something that we can actually note when we sort of reflect on, of course, the nature of media, especially advertising. And later on, you have the opportunity to compare advertising media with other forms of media. Any questions from the audience? Bruno, you were raising your hand.
Well, this way we get paid. I usually have a question.
Right.
Michael, thank you for your very insightful lecture. Most of the data that you presented implied heavily that advertising tends to reflect very conservative values, stereotypes when it comes to representation of gender, age, social roles. But advertising does have a power to also reverse these stereotypes. One campaign that comes to my mind is Dove, where they had that campaign about body positivity and try to kind of challenge norms of beauty. So I was wondering, did you encounter any ads that at least tried to reverse some of these stereotypes, or was it overwhelmingly in favor of affirming these dominant movements?
Okay, thank you so much, and great to see you again after a long time. Yeah, that's a good question, and you're right, there are these ads, and even in our data, even though I have to say in these particular data sets we had, there were actually nearly none, but certainly I'm aware of these, what I call exceptional ads, and they're exception because they're not the norm, and everybody knows these ads, but if you look at thousands of ads, then they start disappearing in the data. Because the majority of ads are not like that. But I totally agree, and I think advertising would be actually a great way also based on its short form, which is nowadays also very popular, to actually promote such different ways of thinking. And you raised the Dove campaigns, they had many campaigns, as you correctly said. They also had a campaign which was what they call pro-age, for example, so not only about body image, the famous campaigns about body image, but also about aging, where they intentionally used old women actually, in the US even naked old women, which led to kind of a scandal, and was not shown in some countries actually, and to really kind of question this perception and this norm that mostly in cosmetic ads, it's young women who are used. So, and I think these kind of ads are important to lead to these kind of discussions. And I think there are tendencies, particularly in Western countries, I can see that there are more and more models that look more normal, let's say, and not these kind of supermodels anymore. So there are really some changes. When in my class on media representation, when I show students, for example, ads about LGBTQ plus community, but honestly, these ads are nearly all from the US, and nearly all from some very famous companies like Apple, and in other countries, even my own country, thinking about, even though we have same-sex marriage and these things, but I could not imagine that this ad would be shown on TV. That a same-sex couple is kissing in a TV ad, I would be really surprised to see that in my country. We're also quite conservative, probably, despite having some laws that accept officially everybody. But again, in a TV ad like that, I'm sure in the US, obviously, we know it's a very divided country anyway. But still, these companies probably also think their target group is more on that side, like Apple, for example. But still, these companies take this small risk, I would say, and say, yes, we stand for this group. And we really say, and I really, actually, in some of these ads, I had to cry, I have to honestly say. They were really showing these groups in such a normalized way. They did not say, oh, these are this gay that are funny or whatever, which is existing in many countries. But they really showed the two husbands that raised the child and showed kind of how they were dealing with her hair issue. It was actually a hair commercial, some other commercial that comes to mind. And it was really so heartwarming that I thought, even people who feel like they don't like gay, but after seeing that ad, I don't think anybody can say that, or these people are really crazy, kind of. You know, it was really, the story was told in such a good way. So I think ads could be such a powerful way, actually, to also bring these discussions back, and especially with emotions, just what I said now, with emotions to really also bring some change and acceptance to society. And media in general. Like, to stay with that topic, like when I look like the LGBTQ plus in the US, it also changed, I mean, now it's a backlash somehow, but anyway, it changed a lot over the last 20 years. There was no agreement at all, no majority at all that would have supported the same-sex marriage 20 years ago. But I think the media played a big role in many series, many US series. It's totally normal that there's these couples also. Even maybe people don't encounter in everyday life, maybe many of them if they live somewhere in the countryside or whatever, but they see it every day and they just say, yeah, they should do whatever they want. Maybe that's kind of the most passive approach. But at least not saying, oh, we are against it. At least saying, oh, we respect it, and as long as they don't harm anybody, they should do what they want. So again, I think the media and the advertising is just a small part of it, can play a very important role to make people more comfortable feeling about different kind of maybe new thoughts. And in that sense, these ads are very important. And one last short, I answered too long, one last short comment on that. There's actually tons of research, also effect studies showing that these counter stereotypes in ads or in other media, they have a very strong effect the same way as the stereotypical portrayals have. The stereotypical portrayals have an effect that people become more stereotypical in their thinking. But if you show them just a few like ads or other media content that really questions the stereotype or shows a counter stereotype, a woman engineer or this kind of things, for example, which is still not enough, people really start changing their mind. Small girls see these ads and think, yes, I can become an engineer. Otherwise, they just always see mother and cook. Nothing against mother and cook, it's an important job. But again, there should be a diversity of range of representation, not just a limited focused one.
Thank you. Anyone from the audience? Yeah, please approach the mic and introduce yourself.
Good morning, I'm Venus. So my question is more about, okay, I'll give a background first. So I was actually really impressed with the presentation. Like, I appreciated your very diverse background on media representation, since that's not something that's usually discussed in a lot of like scholarly talks that I've been in. So in connection to that, since knowing your substantial background on media, I would like to know if there's like a regional difference between how different countries have this sort of advertising technique. So if there's a difference between Eastern and Western media, and in connection to that, how has Western media influenced Korean advertising, and how has that evolved since the early 2000s? Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you so much. That's a good question, which I think I can only partly answer maybe. There are certainly differences in West and East, even so honestly I'm always a bit careful with these West-East comparisons. When I started doing my studies on Asia, at that time in Japan, there were so many studies comparing mostly Japan and the US, and they always showed the strong opposing sides, like US is fact-driven as, and Japan is kind of more on the soft side, and they only do emotions and something like that. And honestly, when I looked at the ads, then, I mean, there's always academic articles, always a bit older already. When I looked at the ads, I could already see a shift, and also in Japan it became more fact-driven. And so I think it's sometimes related also with the economy and all kind of other issues, or with the product. If the product is new, you have to present more facts than if the product is already more established, where you can do more image-driven campaigns and so on. In the case of Korea, I don't see a huge Western influence in that sense. Maybe I would say, even so, yeah, certainly many of the essentials are certainly going back to Western countries when it comes also to advertising and other media. But I don't really see so much of that I really say, oh, this is now a big Western influence. In the case of Korean advertising in general, I think Korean advertising is basically a reflection of of the whole K-wave to a certain extent. When you look Korean advertising, there are a lot of K-pop stars, and as I said, more than half of the ads actually celebrities, which is a very high number. And that's actually a very big difference to Western countries, even though it changed nowadays. I know in Philippines there's also a substantial number of celebrities, also in some other Asian countries, but in most Western countries the percentages are around 10% or even less. So there are not too many celebrities actually. While I know in this part of the world, Japan also very high, Korea very high, mostly around 50-60% of ads actually celebrities. So there are different reasons, cultural reasons and so on. I cannot go into detail now here. But that's, I would say, a big difference also between Western ads and Korean ads. But again, it's not only Korea. That there are so many celebrities and there's a kind of obsession. Actually, in Western countries, they say if you have no other idea, take a celebrity kind of. I'm not sure if that's the reason in the case of Korea, but I think it's just a tradition. And these celebrities are popular, and they use them, and it worked, and they keep reusing it, and they have an image. They can transfer this image maybe to the product somehow. They use some celebrities that fit very well. So in that sense, I don't see too big Western influence. Let me say one more thing. It's unrelated to your question, but just comes to my mind. I didn't point it out. I think one thing, and that's to all of you Korean scholars, we have to be careful not to single out one country. And I speak from my own history. When I started, I did mostly Japan. And I only looked at Japan and said, oh, Japan is so unique, it's only like this. And which is kind of called Nihonshin Ron, it's kind of perpetuating Japanese nationalism. I was part of it. Saying now it is critically. But actually, if you only look at Korea, it's the same thing. You will also say, oh, Korea is like that it's so unique, it's so crazy about technology, whatever. Especially if you're like compared to totally different countries again. Mostly in many studies are West comparison, for example. So I think that's a kind of risk. I think you should look a bit broader. I mean, you can maybe only look at one country, we have budget limitations and whatever, but you should be still a bit open-minded and look around what's going on in other countries and not just come then to the conclusion, oh, Korea is so special. Because maybe there's something very similar going on in Japan or wherever else, I don't know. It depends what it is now. So in that sense, I think it's very good to keep your mind wide and not just focus so strongly on this one particular country and think this is the only country existing in the world, kind of. So I think that's something I would like to give you on the way. Again, become Korea scholar, that's totally fine, but still be careful with making the conclusion that say, oh, this is only Korea. Korea is the only country where you can drive without having traffic or something like that. Just comparing it not to Philippines. There are many other countries like that. And also many countries that have traffic jam. So again, whatever you look at, if you compare two countries, the conclusion will always be faulted, in my opinion. If you compare maybe 5 Southeast Asian countries and 5 developed countries, you will see probably these countries share some similarities, or maybe in other aspects not. Again, as I said, there are budget limitations, whatever, even in my case. But I think it's important not just to be too strongly focused on only one place, particularly when you draw your conclusions then.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prieler. And I think there's really a kind of wisdom to the comparative approach, because it really widens, I think, our perspective. Okay, of course, we are aware of the context in which comparisons are made, but of course, we balance the two sort of components. I think we don't have time, otherwise we won't have coffee break before the next session. So, we really had a fabulous time with the first plenary session, and to give honor and thanks to our speaker. So may I call Professor Bain and for the recognition of our speaker. So let me read. Okay. Sorry. So this certificate of appreciation is presented to Dr. Michael Prieler for serving as a keynote speaker at the 2024 Philippine K-Culture Conference held at the Pilar Herrera Hall, Palma Hall, University of the Philippines, Quezon City, Philippines. Awarded on this 5th day of December 2024 by Professor Kyung-Min Bae, Director of the UP Korea Research Center. Token from UP Korea Research Center. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So we will have a break before the two parallel sessions. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.